Today I was absolutely floored by a movie. It's the 2021 South Korean film Emergency Declaration, a star-studded disaster thriller that completely blew me away. The plot is full of twists and turns from start to finish, and the emotional ending hits hard without being over the top, earning high praise from audiences. Let's dive right in, because I seriously can't wait to share this story with you. In a bustling airport terminal in Seoul, a man tries to randomly choose the flight with the most passengers to carry out a planned terror attack. He politely asks a customer service agent which flight has the most passengers, but the agent declines to answer due to privacy rules. To his surprise, the moment the agent refuses, the man's polite demeanor vanishes and he snaps, hurling vicious words at the employee.
저기요.
네.
그런 식으로 좀 마세요, 제발. 걸레 같은 게 이씨.
Meanwhile, a father and his daughter enter the scene. The little girl asks her dad to stay in line while she runs off to the restroom by herself. But since the line for the women's bathroom is way too long and she's in a hurry, she heads next door instead, and that's exactly where the man who's planning the attack happens to be. He's hiding in a stall, wincing in pain as he stuffs a bottle-like object into a wound under his armpit. He grits his teeth and uses a needle to sew up the wound, showing just how determined he is to carry out his deadly plan. As he finishes up and walks over to the sink to clean the bloody injury, he suddenly feels like someone is watching him.
저기요. 수야. 수야.
아빠!
너 왜 여기 있어?
Seeing the father and daughter walking away, a new idea sparks in his mind. He follows them into the main hall and, like a clueless stranger, awkwardly asks where they're flying to. When they ignore him, he bends over to peek at their luggage tags.
얘 지금 뭐래요? 네?
아, 이 사람 진짜 왜 이래?
얘 지금 나보고 뭐라 그랬잖아요.
저리 안 가.
Watching them walk away, he heads straight to the ticket counter, buys a seat on the same flight, and easily clears security to board the plane, which is carrying 150 passengers. Just as he gets on board, the little girl's father, Jae-hyuk, spots him and finds him a bit suspicious, but brushes it off. After all, who would ever imagine someone could be crazy enough to endanger an entire plane full of people? As the cabin doors close, Flight K-1501 takes off with everyone on board, unknowingly beginning a deadly journey. At the same time, a nearby police station receives a tip someone has uploaded a video online threatening to attack a plane today, and according to the caller, the man in the video is someone from their neighborhood. While many officers think it's just a prank, the cautious officer In-ho decides to investigate with his partner, heading straight to the suspect's address. When they arrive and push open the slightly ajar door, a wave of rotting stench hits them in the face, and In-ho instantly senses something is very wrong. Sure enough, inside the house, they discover a severely decomposed corpse. Soon, more police and forensic teams arrive at the scene. Initial tests show the victim had ruptured capillaries and signs of coughing blood, indicating possible poisoning. Police also find dozens of videotapes in the house footage of lab experiments using white mice. In the videos, the man pours powder into boxes, and within seconds, the mice die with bursting blood vessels. The gruesome footage leads the forensic expert to believe the powder is a virus that's been extracted and frozen, and based on the tapes, they come to a horrifying conclusion. The suspect wasn't just testing the virus's spread, but was also improving it by shortening its incubation time. When the corpse tests positive for the virus, and the likely cause of death is confirmed to be infection, In-ho's heart sinks. He rushes to the airport, his anxiety growing, because his wife is flying out from Seoul Airport today and she's not answering her phone. All he can do is pray the suspect, Jin-suk, didn't board the flight to Hawaii. But when he finally gets to the airport and learns from staff that Jin-suk is indeed on that flight, and even worse, his wife's name is on the passenger list, In-ho nearly passes out from the shock. He races to the control tower, flashes his badge, and begs them to recall the flight immediately. But ordering an international flight to turn around just based on one man's word isn't something they can do. Meanwhile, up in the air, passengers are still completely unaware of the danger. They're enjoying their in-flight meals and admiring the clouds outside. But as Jin-suk gets up from his seat, the nightmare begins. He walks straight to the bathroom, pulls out a small bottle from under his arm, and loads it into an asthma inhaler. Then, covering his nose and mouth, he sprays the virus all over the bathroom. After finishing, he steps out and runs into Jae-hyuk's daughter, Soo-min, who's waiting to use the restroom. His expression turns eerily strange as he steps aside to let her in, but just as Soo-min is about to walk in, another passenger slips in ahead of her.
아저씨가 너무 급해서 미안해. 야, 엄마 운 좋네.
Jin-suk bends down and whispers something into Soo-min's ear before walking away. Inside the bathroom, the man notices a powdery substance in the air, waves it away in annoyance, and storms out grumbling. He quickly finds a flight attendant to complain. She rushes to check and, noticing the powder, casually wipes it up with a tissue without realizing she's now helping spread the virus. Moments later, she heads straight to deliver lunch to the captain, and while plating a steak, a bit of the virus powder falls from her onto the meat. Unaware of everything, she serves it, essentially feeding the virus directly to the captain. Not long after, turbulence shakes the plane and wakes Jae-hyuk. As he turns his head, he notices the passenger next to him watching a video, the same one where a man threatens to carry out a terror attack on a plane. The passenger laughs it off as a joke, but Jae-hyuk goes pale, realizing the man in the video is also on the plane right now. Even worse, he learns something even more terrifying from Soo-min. Jae-hyuk immediately shows the video to the crew and points out that Jin-suk has something hidden under his arm. He suspects it's a weapon. To prove it's serious, he brings Soo-min forward and asks her to repeat what Jin-suk whispered to her.
우리 여기 있는 사람들 다 죽는다고.
As she speaks, everyone is stunned. The head flight attendant quickly approaches Jin-suk to question him, but he flatly denies everything. With no solid evidence, the attendant turns back to Jae-hyuk, promising to keep an eye on Jin-suk and urging him to stay quiet to avoid causing panic. But by now, the first infected passenger is showing symptoms: intense itching, rashes on his arm, and unbearable pressure in his head. He checks himself in the mirror, only to suddenly have a nosebleed, followed by his left eyeball literally bursting. Screaming in agony, he stumbles out of the restroom begging for help, his horrifying appearance making other passengers back away in fear. Within moments, he vomits blood and collapses. A doctor among the passengers rushes over to examine him, but it's too late. The man is already dead. The passengers are shocked, but they still don't realize how serious the situation is, gathering around to gawk at the gruesome scene. That's when Jae-hyuk notices something chilling. Jin-suk is standing among the crowd, smiling. Jae-hyuk now knows this can't be a coincidence. He lunges at Jin-suk, rips open his shirt to expose the stitched-up wound, and demands to know what he's hiding. Just as the confrontation escalates, co-pilot Hyun-soo arrives. He pulls Jae-hyuk away and pulls out a piece of paper to confirm Jin-suk's identity. Because just moments earlier, the cockpit had received a message from ground control confirming that Jin-suk planned to unleash a deadly virus on board. That's why Hyun-soo rushed over, but in his haste, he failed to notice that the captain was already developing a rash on his hand. Facing the interrogation, Jin-suk pretends to be deaf and mute, then suddenly bolts into the crowd and pulls out his inhaler amid the chaos. Though he's quickly restrained by the surrounding passengers, it's already too late. Jin-suk has released the virus before being subdued. Not long after, air traffic control receives word that Jin-suk has been apprehended. But with it comes the devastating news: a passenger has died from the virus. The virus has now been unleashed on the plane, and the gravity of the situation catches the attention of top officials, who immediately form an emergency response team. They quickly place a call to the plane, hoping to negotiate with Jin-suk for an antidote. But to their shock, Jin-suk is fully prepared to die, and he makes it clear his goal is for every soul on that plane to perish with him.
나는 여기 있는 사람들이 전부 다 죽었으면 좋겠어요. 한 명도 빠짐없이.
Hearing such deranged words, Hyun-soo loses it, grabs Jin-suk by the collar, and demands to know where the antidote is, only for Jin-suk to suddenly let out a twisted grin, then cough up a mouthful of blood, spraying it all over Hyun-soo's face. At the same time, an even greater crisis unfolds. The captain succumbs to the virus and dies in the cockpit, leaving the plane to plummet at 200 meters per second, completely out of control. Chaos erupts throughout the cabin. In the midst of the chaos, a crew member unbuckles his seatbelt and risks his life, staggering toward the cockpit to try and regain control of the now weightless plane. But with the plane shaking violently and the captain's corpse in the way, he struggles to succeed. As the plane rapidly approaches the ocean, Jae-hyuk arrives just in time. He quickly deploys the speed brakes, props up the captain's body, and together with the crew member, grits his teeth and pulls with all his might on the control yoke, miraculously leveling the aircraft and averting disaster. As the plane stabilizes, Hyun-soo rushes in and exchanges a glance with Jae-hyuk, and in that moment, everything clicks. It turns out Jae-hyuk used to be a pilot. Hyun-soo's wife once worked for the same airline, but after a past incident, Jae-hyuk voluntarily resigned and hadn't touched a plane since. But in those few critical minutes, he stepped up and saved everyone. Meanwhile, Jin-suk succumbs to the virus and dies. Devastating news for the emergency team on the ground. This unknown virus would take months to develop a cure for. To make matters worse, footage of Jin-suk's capture and the chaos inside the cabin was recorded by a journalist passenger and sent to a TV station using the airline's onboard Wi-Fi. Now the story has already gone public as breaking news. The emergency team, who had hoped to keep things under wraps, are left with no choice but to hold a press conference and reveal the full extent of the crisis. When passengers learn through the news that there's an unknown, highly contagious virus spreading inside the cabin, panic sets in instantly. As more and more people collapse and die from the virus, including the flight attendant who violently convulses and foams at the mouth before dying on duty, the horrific visuals leave every surviving passenger gripped with despair. To try to contain the outbreak, the crew decides to isolate all symptomatic passengers. Anyone showing blisters or a fever is moved to the back of the plane, but during the transfer, Sumin is mistaken for being infected due to a rash on her arm, and frightened passengers force her and her father into the isolation zone. As time ticks away, the plane gets closer and closer to Hawaii, but just as they enter US airspace, they receive a chilling message. They are denied permission to land. Even Hyunsu's emergency declaration makes no difference. This sparks frustration among high-ranking South Korean officials, but they don't dare protest too hard, and in the end, they have no choice but to issue Hyunsu the heartbreaking order to turn back. As Hyunsu steers the plane away, the golden glow of the setting sun pours into the cabin, symbolizing the dwindling time left for the passengers, whose lives now hang by a thread. But hope remains. There are still people on the ground fighting for them, and In-ho is one of them. After digging deeper, he learns from Jin-suk's former colleague that their company once obtained a virus through covert channels and Jin-suk was the lead researcher. However, after a lab accident infected 3 staff members, killing 2 and severely injuring 1, the company immediately fired Jin-suk. Learning that there's a surviving victim in the hospital, In-ho clings to this last ray of hope and races there at top speed. Through the survivor, In-ho gains deeper insight into Jin-suk. His mother was a renowned biologist who treated him with relentless harshness, and whenever Jin-suk felt overwhelmed by pressure, he found joy in killing animals. Back then, she and his colleagues had reported their findings to the company, which led to Jin-suk being suspended for a while. But the lab accident wasn't really an accident, it was Jin-suk's carefully planned revenge after he returned to work. The survivor clearly remembers how, as he and his co-workers twisted in agony after exposure to the virus, Jin-suk just stood there, watching them with a smile on his face. With the survivor's help, they confirmed that the virus on the plane is the same one they had previously researched. Even better, he revealed that the company already has an antiviral formula in development. Armed with this breakthrough, In-ho rushes to the company, but since it's a foreign-owned facility and he lacks a warrant, he's stopped at the gate by security. The company representative firmly denies any knowledge of the virus or an antidote. As tensions rise, the head of the emergency response team arrives with a large group of officers and lays it all out. If it's discovered that the virus leaked from their lab, and they have a vaccine but refuse to cooperate, the consequences won't stop at bankruptcy. Under pressure, the company's West District representative finally admits they have the vaccine and promises to provide free doses for everyone on the flight. When the passengers hear this uplifting news, many of them burst into tears, hugging each other in celebration. But while they rejoice, in the cockpit, Hyunsu is barely holding on. His hands are now covered in blisters, and he's started coughing up blood. Realizing he might not make it back to Korea, he calls in the head flight attendant and asks for Jae-hyuk to be brought, and he needs him to be ready to take over. But from the look on Jae-hyuk's face, it's clear he's not prepared. Although once an outstanding pilot, a past incident that led to the deaths of 2 flight attendants left him with crippling aviophobia. Still, with the situation this dire, he grits his teeth and sits down in the co-pilot's seat. As time passes, Hyunsu's condition worsens. Every cough brings up more blood. Knowing both pilots are now compromised, he makes a snap decision to reroute the plane to Narita Airport in Japan. But what he didn't expect was that even after reaching their destination, they were still denied permission to land even though a vaccine had already been developed. To make matters worse, Japan scrambles fighter jets and fires warning missiles, forcing the infected plane out of its airspace. As the plane leaves Japanese skies, Hyunsu loses consciousness. Thankfully, Jae-hyuk takes control just in time, stabilizing the aircraft. While Jae-hyuk flies toward Korea, Japan issues a public statement. Their refusal to allow a landing wasn't heartless. They believe the virus may have already mutated. Since its incubation period is much shorter than the original strain, this one statement stirs up a storm. Japan shifts the blame, but it leaves the passengers in utter despair. Even some South Korean officials start to panic, suggesting the plane land at a remote military base, but for a flight that has already made a full international round trip. Such a diversion is basically a death sentence. The remaining fuel barely guarantees arrival in Seoul. The emergency response chief strongly opposes this idea. A fierce debate breaks out among high-level officials. Watching all of this unfold, In-ho thinks of his wife on board and of their daughter, still waiting for her mother to come home. He makes a bold, desperate decision, ignoring his partner's pleas. In-ho storms into the temporary virus lab, pulls a gun, and forces the staff to inject him with a large dose of the virus. He wants to test the vaccine himself. By the time the emergency chief arrives, In-ho is already in critical condition, undergoing emergency treatment. Meanwhile, Jae-hyuk guides the plane into Korean airspace only to be hit with another devastating blow. He has nowhere to land. Not only does Seoul Airport refuse them, but even the military base is now surrounded by angry protesters, making a safe landing impossible. To make things worse, online sentiment turns against them. People start calling the flight a bioweapon missile, and some even suggest the military should shoot it down. Heartbreaking posts flood the internet. Passengers scroll through them in disbelief. When they see that even their families are being treated as threats by the public, someone finally breaks. They ask themselves, do we even deserve to land? If the vaccine doesn't work, will we end up infecting our loved ones too? By now, no one on board has escaped the virus. They don't want to bring this horror back to the people they love. Together, the passengers make a heartbreaking, heroic decision. They won't land. Jae-hyuk broadcasts this message to the world, sharing everyone's love and final wishes through the plane's radio. The angry crowd outside the airport falls silent.
여기는 스카이 코리아 501 들리세요? 들립니다. 이 비행기에 탄 우리 모두는 착륙하지 않기로 했습니다.
Watching the aircraft circle overhead like an orphan in the sky, family members on the ground are devastated. They begin to receive final messages from their loved ones aboard.
사랑해 우리 딸. 아빠 그리고 영양제 내가 챙겨놓은 거 알지? 그거 꼬박꼬박 다 챙겨 먹어야 돼.
할머니 나 너무 무서워. 엄마 아빠랑 오빠랑 같이 해서.
사랑한다.
It's the most gut-wrenching moment in the entire story. The plane's lights flicker in the night as it drifts farther away, slowly disappearing into the sky. The whole world seems to hold its breath. But then amid this crushing silence, a sharp beep rings out in the emergency room. The monitor next to In-ho's lifeless body lights up again. In-ho miraculously regained consciousness. He just proved the vaccine works with his life. But inside the plane, Jae-hyuk had already shut off the radio, so air traffic control can't relay the good news. Now, their only hope lies with the passengers' families.
항바이러스 치료제가 작용하는 걸 확인했습니다. 비행기와 교신이 안 되니 어서 가족들에게 얘기해 주세요. 돌아오라고요.
One by one, phones light up in the cabin. Each glowing screen brings tears of joy. It's the signal they've been praying for. Hope is alive. In the final moments, Jae-hyuk, having conquered his fear, draws on his flying experience and, with the last drops of fuel, safely lands the plane with 110 survivors. And with that, the film ends.